The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. This is Dawn English. Thank you for joining the webinar. I want to confirm that you all can hear me. So if you could go to the questions tab and just let me know if you can hear me or not. All right, excellent. My name is Dawn English. I am an Outrival Racing Coach Premier Level 2 coming at you from just outside of Houston, Texas. And the topic of this evening's webinar is when your limiters might not be what you think they are, your weaknesses are in disguise. So I thought this topic would be beneficial because triathlon has so many facets to it that often what people think when they come to their race execution that is going wrong in their training or the things they need to go back and work on are not actually the root of the issue. They're just a symptom of the actual cause. So I thought it would be interesting to look at some of the common ones that we've seen in working with athletes and ways that they can be addressed. So before we move on to each slide this evening, I will have a look at the questions tab there on the right. And if you have any questions as I go along, please type that in and I will attempt to answer those before we move on to the next slide. And if there's anything that I don't have an answer for, I will make sure to get back to you with that answer. So first of all, what is a limiter? Another term for a limiter could be a weakness, but it's something that's holding you back from reaching your goals, particularly your race goals. So we do all of this training and work and work towards triathlon for that race day. And sometimes it comes together better than others, but what is holding you back from getting there? It could be things that are happening day to day in training. It could be things that are happening race day. So 143 days without addressing the real problem. And that's what happens a lot of times as triathletes is you are trying to figure out what's causing your issue with fueling in a race or why your run isn't as good as it should be in training. And so we want to address those things so that you can get closer to the real problem. Sometimes they're pretty obvious to everyone but us. And we'll talk about some of those this evening as well. So a very common one, I wanted to start with this one. It's probably the most common one that I see in coaching. Oh, and I didn't tell you briefly about myself. So I've been coaching for 10 years. And I have been personally doing triathlons for 20 years. And I've coached a variety of athletes, different ages, levels, and distances. And so a very common one that I see for people is in a race, their run performance does not jive with what they're seeing in training. Their paces in training, even the way that their brick runs go, which is where you come right off the bike and you do a run. And so a lot of times the answer to that, when they come off the bike wanting to feel like the cheetah, but they end up being more like the guy at the bottom, is they think that they need to do more running speed work. They're just not running hard enough. I've seen a lot of athletes that this will happen to them in races, and then they go and they're doing track workouts on a regular basis, which are great. The speed work is a good thing, but it's got to be done strategically. However, sometimes the issue is simply race fueling. If you have not gotten in what you need the morning of on the bike, and then you head out on that run, you're not going to be able to run to your potential. It could be over biking. People will ride too hard and then you head out and your legs just can't do it. If you are riding at a very high heart rate, above anaerobic, and you're doing a longer race or even an Olympic race and you're riding all out, you're not going to have the run that you could have. Running too hard in training. So this one gets tricky. So if you are doing most of your runs at a high intensity, particularly anaerobic, or if you're doing anaerobic training and you don't have a strong base, that's when you go, when you're out of your aerobic zone, you're not going to be able to sustain that in training. So triathlon is probably the only sport where a sprint is still at least an hour event. So to be successful in triathlon, it's all aerobic. It's all about building that aerobic zone. Yes, you do want to do some work anaerobically to help you with some speed and power, but most of your work needs to be in that aerobic zone. So working your entire aerobic zone all the way up to that aerobic threshold is really your best training approach to be successful in racing. So if you're doing most of your training at that high intensity, you're not going to have a good race result in terms of your run. So sometimes in a race, the bike and run performance isn't where it should be. It's just not what you're seeing in training. It's not what's happening in the race. What a lot of times people think it is, again, they're not riding and running enough. They need to do some more intervals. They need to work a little bit harder. But what it might be, again, is fueling. If you are not practicing your fueling in training, if you're not executing it in a race, you will not ride and run appropriately up to your abilities. Another one could be you're not swimming enough. So most people that race triathlons, and I guess specifically with long course because of the time constraints with that, so half Ironman and Ironman, swimming once or twice a week, the caveat to that is if you grew up swimming and you're a Division I swimmer, you're in a whole nother league. But if you are an adult onset swimmer or you didn't grow up swimming and you're swimming once or twice a week and you're not swimming a whole lot of volume, maybe 1,000, 2,000, it's just simply not enough in a race. And then you come off out of the water with a lot of fatigue on your body. And so you're heading into that bike more fatigued a lot of times than people realize. I hear a lot of triathletes say, well, I'm not good at the swim, so I'll just get through that and get on the bike and run, and they don't spend time in their training. So a very beneficial thing that you can do is a couple of things. If you've never had your stroke assessed, if you know you have bad technique, have that looked at. You can go forward in biking and running and have poor technique. It might not be the best. You could be faster, but you'll still move forward. If you don't have it in swimming, you will not go forward. And you're actually wasting more energy fighting the water than learning to work with it. So that would be number one. Number two is upping your swim volume makes a big difference. A little more frequency throughout the week. So that in a race, you really want to aim to come out of that water as though you have done nothing. Your body is so used to swimming that you're not carrying that fatigue with you into the bike. So race fueling. You come into a race and the fueling, what you use just doesn't work. You might throw up, you have a gurgly stomach. It's just, it doesn't work. So a lot of times people immediately think they need to change their fueling. So they will go and buy a whole nother slew of products, and then the other products sit in their cupboard unused. And then they buy something else, and then the experiment starts all over again. But a lot of times what it is athletes don't practice this in training. So we really advocate practicing all race fueling in training. And that doesn't mean your 2 longest rides or runs or bricks before your race. That means every time. So knowing what works and what doesn't work, using it in different, you know, using it in the heat or the weather that you're going to be in race day, using it day in, day out so your body is used to it. We call it training your gut, and you do need to train your body to learn to metabolize fuel when you're training so that you can execute it race day. It's not going to magically come together race day, especially for longer races if you're doing half Ironmans or Ironman events. So sometimes athletes will be following a training plan, maybe working with a coach, and they feel like the training strategy is not working. So they feel like they need to get a new training plan or a new coach and try something new. Sometimes, though, what it is they just haven't spent enough time doing it. It takes time to get those results. So a month, 6 weeks generally is not enough time to see those results. So sometimes what athletes will do is you try one approach for a month or two and you're not seeing any benefit. So then you'll try another one and another one so that you never get to really invest and grow with whatever that plan is giving you to change. And if you start working with a new coach, particularly, a lot of times you need to be broken down a little bit and change some things. And typically, if you want to get better, you've got to work on some things that maybe you're not as good at that are tougher to do. Like if you need to build an aerobic base, that can take a lot of wherewithal to slow down, pull back your intensity to build that aerobic base before you can start going hard again. So sometimes athletes just aren't patient enough with the process. And by staying consistent and being patient, oftentimes it does pay off. So this is one I added a little bit later. And I notice sometimes in triathlon culture, nagging aches and pains are just, they seem to be part of it, that it is acceptable to always have something that you're dealing with. So a lot of athletes will keep trying new recovery and treatments, and those are great. I mean, we have so many tools now to help avoid injury and learn to manage certain aches and pains, and it's great, and it's worth trying new treatments and recoveries. However, the issue comes in when athletes are doing that in lieu of dealing with the root of the problem. So sometimes if they just get a little bit more rest, maybe not train as much or train at lower intensities, or maybe run a little less, swim a little more, that can make some of those aches and pains go away. Periodization. Probably many of you know, basically what periodization is having periods where you work harder, less hard, higher volume, less volume within your week, within your month, within your year. So sometimes athletes that have nagging aches and pains, they're not periodizing on a regular basis. So a common thing that you will see is athletes that go from a spring Ironman, maybe a summer Ironman, rolling into fall marathons, rolling into a half marathon, rolling into an Ironman. So there's no chunk of time where you're getting more rest. Every athlete should have a couple of months out of the year, if you're racing consistently, where you pulling back your volume, not being sedentary, but you're being more of a normal exerciser. One thing a day, lower volume, lower intensity, and that really can allow that soft tissue to repair, do some other activities, and keeps you going. It also does a lot for your motivation. You could also have imbalances. If you're not doing strength training, particularly things that target muscle imbalances, that can go a really long way in dealing with some aches and pains. Technique. For bike, run, and swim, making changes in your technique can not only help you go faster, which is great, but more importantly, it can help keep you from getting injured. So having a look at those on a regular basis, having someone look at you, if you have race photos, those race photos can tell you a lot, especially later in the run when you're tired. uh, what is your body doing? You might see a pronation or something going on somewhere else when you're running that can really give you clues to some things you could work on. So in general, sometimes someone's race performance will start declining, and there's really no particular reason for it. Training's going well. You used to race well. Your fueling seems to be on point. So sometimes people think, well, I just need to start training harder. When sometimes it's a deeper issue, periodization again, weekly, monthly, yearly, making sure that you are resting as intently as you're training. A huge breakthrough for a lot of athletes that we work with when we start working with them is how easy we take our recovery bikes and our recovery runs. I mean, they're no joke. So you'll have someone that they're used to running all of their runs at 7-8 minute miles. And then we're telling them for their recovery runs, you need to be more like 9 and 10 minutes a mile or slower. But that goes a really long way. It's almost like physical therapy. It gets blood flow to the feet. It helps repair soft tissue. And it's not taxing on the nervous system. And so having those days goes a really long way in allowing you to really see the benefits of your harder workouts. Again, rest, more sleep, more time when you're not training can make a really big difference. And going along with that, you must have mistaken my silence as interest in your triathlon training. Sometimes you just need to step away. Aspects of this sport can be very consuming, especially now. We're surrounded by it all the time with our screens, and then we can train, and then we can look at our Garmin, and then we can look at social media. And so if you're finding yourself feeling consumed with triathlon and your race performance is going down, sometimes you just need to step away and remind yourself that you've got other interests, you've got other things. Sometimes I've even told athletes, go hang out with people that don't do this at all. And just to give you a little broader perspective, because perspective can go a long way with your mental fitness in approaching triathlon, that there's more out there than just this, even though it's awesome. Okay, race execution. What you think it is. I need to train harder. That's a common theme, right? The race didn't go as planned. Everything was seemed to be going well. I practiced my fueling. I practiced everything. And I just need to train harder. Sometimes all it is mental fitness. All it is. Actually, it's sometimes all it is that makes it sound like it's easy to fix. Mental fitness can be the most difficult one to address sometimes. But really be aware of your self-talk. When training is hard, when racing is hard, which it will be, what do you tell yourself? Are you telling yourself you're slow? Are you telling yourself you can do it? Are you telling yourself it's hard? So pay attention to those voices and how you are responding to adverse conditions, hard sessions, and what is that mental chatter, and get some responses to that. We also have a library if you are an Outrival QT2 Run Formula athlete that address a lot of mental fitness issues. I encourage you to listen to those. And if you need additional assistance, we do have a psychologist that you can work with. But race talk during the race, what you tell yourself, how you're feeling, your confidence goes a very long way for race performance. Brace yourself, Ironman triathlon poster coming. So with social media, sometimes that can feed not the positive things about racing and training. So if those kind of things encourage you, great. If they don't, pace yourself, step away, and limit yourself. Because those things even can carry over into your training and then carry over to race day as well. So I debated how to include these in this session, but an important component is just getting back to basics. And some of these issues can hinder people's race day and be a limiter when everything else is great. And they're so simple, people will overlook them sometimes. So bike handling. Indoor trainers are super popular right now. They are great. They are time savers. You can control conditions. They're obviously safer. You don't have cars going by you. They are great. However, I've really seen people's bike handling skills go down. They have not taken time where they have focused on riding on the road for a while, knowing how to turn, knowing how to take a water bottle hand up, drinking while you're on your bike, looking behind you, and then looking forward while holding your line. These are all skills you should be very comfortable with if you're racing triathlons. And if you haven't taken time to do that, take time to do it. Obviously find a safe place, but take that as seriously as you do any other part of your training. That can hinder race day if you don't know how to descend on a hill. If you're gripping the bars really tight, if you can't hold your line and you crash, and it just creates a lot of tension. I guarantee you're going to have a little higher heart rate and working a little harder than you need to be. In addition to that, it's just not safe if you cannot handle your bike comfortably. Clothing, so simple again, but whatever you're wearing race day, make sure you've tested it in training. If you are doing long course racing, half Ironman and Ironman distance, guarantee you're going to have some chafe somewhere that is really going to hurt no matter how much you've worn those clothes. However, make sure in training you've been able to wear everything for every long bike and long run, wear what you're going to wear race day. So you know if there's any glaring chafing issues, comfort issues, logistic issues with pockets or whatever, so that race day, that is not an additional obstacle that you're dealing with. Fueling logistics. I don't know that you want your fuel to look like the sky on the bike, but race day, know how you're going to carry everything. And you should have done this in training. Do you see the common theme? Nothing we do race day we haven't done in training. So know how you're going to carry things, what pockets you're going to use, if you're going to use like a fuel belt, if you've got a bento box type thing for your bike, how many water bottle cages, what you're going to take if there's water bottle hand ups, if you're going to use special needs. Know all of that well before. So race day, there's nothing new that's happening. If you are going to be taking fuel with you and mixing drinks, do that when you're training. Bring that with you in your kit. Be mixing that up at the gas station when you take your break to refuel, so that you've already done all of that. So that race day, that doesn't become a limiter because you drop a bottle. You don't know how your pockets work on your kit. And most importantly, remember why you do this. Sometimes the biggest limiter that we have is not remembering how awesome it is that we get to do this, why it's fun, why we do it, keeping it fun, and remembering the gift that it is. It's all of our free time. Most of us are not professional triathletes, and so we do this in our free time. and we pay to do it. We pay to do these races. And so make sure that we remember that and keep moving forward, and having great race days. Thank you so much for listening in tonight. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send me an email at dawn@outrivalracing.com. Thank you so much.